Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Scribblers Festival. It's so great to have you here. My name is Annabelle Smith. I'm a local author, and I'm delighted to be here today to talk to my wonderful guests, Lynette, Noni, and Jeremy Lachlan. And we're going to talk about how we build books world by magical world. So we're going to talk about world building and the brave and resilient characters we can create along the way. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I introduce my guests. So at the end of the session, there will be 10 minutes for questions for the authors. And then at lunchtime, you'll be able to have books signed, and if you want to buy books in the bookshop next door. So you go out of the door you came in and head down, and then you can have a chat to these guys a little more if you want to and have a book signed. So fantastic, let's get started. On my right is Lynette Noni. Why can't I say that? Lynette Noni. Lynette studied journalism, academic writing and human behaviour at university before venturing into the world of fiction. She is now a full-time writer and the best-selling author of 6 young adult fantasy series, The Madoran Chronicles, as well as a second series called Whisper, which was acquired in the US by the editor of The Hunger Games. That's pretty amazing. Lynette is currently the #1 young adult fiction author in Australia, which is amazing. Welcome, Lynette.
Woo!
Thank you.
Jeremy Lachlan has always been obsessed with big epic adventures in both literature and film. Big bad blockbusters like Star Wars, The Chronicles of Narnia and Jurassic Park. Years of experience as a Sydney bookseller have paid off, and Jeremy has delivered the blockbuster duology the world has been waiting for. Book 1, Jane Doe and the Cradle of All Worlds, is out now. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you so much.
So I love to get started with a reading because I love for you guys who haven't come across the books that these authors have written to get a feel for what the books are like. So, Jeremy, are you happy to get us started with a little bit of Jane Doe?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Great to see you all. My book's called Jane Doe and the Cradle of All Worlds. That's that one. I'm going to just read the prologue for you. The hidden symbol. Her lantern chases shadows through the dark. Cobwebs tear at her fingertips, spiders flee. She runs a hand over the stone wall of the tunnel and breathes in deep, savouring the damp, the dirt, the unknown. She has missed this. People call her an old relic, but they are fools. Winifred Robin is one of the great adventurers. She may be old, but her story is far from complete. Tonight, something has changed. She intends to find out what and why. Winifred was conducting research down in the catacombs when the quake struck. The ground shook, the scrolls trembled, candles toppled from the walls, snuffed out. A deep sound rumbled towards her, the echo of breaking stone. But it's not so much what she heard as what she felt moments later that intrigued her. A sinister breath, a breeze. It blows towards her now, making the cobwebs dance. She is close. There is a chasm around the next bend, a long black void so thick with 1,000-year dark, even the lantern light shies away from it. Winifred does not consider turning back, not for a second. This is a woman who has defeated armies, cheated death, battled gods. There are only 2 things she fears in all the worlds. Heights are not one of them. Lantern hooked onto her belt, she climbs around the edge. A rock clatters into the chasm. The darkness takes it. She never hears it land. She swipes away the odd spider as she navigates the wall, hairy, palm-sized things. The breeze swirls around her from the depths, but she makes it safely to the other side, straightens her crimson cloak, chances a smile. She proceeds with caution now. The island of Blue Haven is riddled with abandoned mines and passages, but this one has sat here in secret for thousands of years, sealed off from the world. Now, on the 2nd anniversary of the night of all catastrophes, 2 years since the quake began, it has opened. She does not believe in coincidence. She knows secrets are kept for a reason. There is a small rock-hewn chamber at the end of the tunnel. Winifred's lantern splashes golden light upon the walls when she steps inside. She frowns. There are no chasms in here, no spiders. In fact, there is nothing at all. The chamber is empty. She turns on the spot, searching, hoping for a secret passage, another path. Could somebody have been here before her, climbed up the chasm from a different tunnel? The floor is bare, no footprints, no deathly triggers set into the stone. She paces around the chamber, runs a hand over the back wall, and that is when she finds it. A small, faded symbol, rust red, like dried blood. An ancient hieroglyph, a triangle with one inward curving side, like a ship's sail or a wave, encased within a circle. Incredible. Winifred knows the symbol, has been scouring the great library for 2 years trying to uncover its meaning, and here it is. It has been right under her feet all along. But how? Why? The symbol calls to her, whispers in a foreign, archaic tongue. She touches it. The symbol flashes, white and blinding. A phantom gust of wind howls through the chamber, kicking up her cloak, swirling dust. Winifred tries to pull her hand away from the wall, but it is stuck, fixed to the symbol, as if seared to a burning hot plate. The pain is excruciating. Not in her hand, though. In her head. Winifred sees things, flashes before her eyes, a story unravelling in her mind like a book read at speed. But not just a story. This is real, or at least it will be. This is a vision of things to come. There is a chase, a cage, a sacrifice. There is a long journey, a trickster and an ally. There are horrors from Winifred's own past, born from the sands of a different world that fill her with a certain cold dread she hasn't felt in years. There is rock and ruin, death and destruction. Just as Winifred thinks she can take no more, the phantom wind ceases, the stone in front of her splinters into 1,000 cracks, and she is thrown back from the wall. The darkness takes her, too. Winifred is not certain how long she is out. By the time she comes to, the lantern has almost burned dry. The dust has settled. The symbol has vanished. She feels strange, drained of all energy, yet filled with something more, a grim sense of purpose. The vision was a gift, a warning, a set of instructions from the makers themselves. Winifred has seen, but more than that, she understands. There are things she must do. This godly gift comes with a price. Winifred stands, holds a scarred, bony hand to the crack wall. She now knows what lies beyond this stone, a wonder beyond wonders. Her hand trembles. She cannot remember the last time she cried, but she allows herself a moment now. She weeps for the things she has done, for the things she is about to do, and for the long road laid out before her. When she is finished, she clears her throat and straightens her crimson cloak once more. Enough. She must leave this place, leave and never return. For the wonder beyond the wall is meant for someone else. This is not Winifred's story after all. It is Jane Doe's, the girl with the amber eyes. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thank you.
So good.
Lynette, over to you.
Okay, so I had a bit of I wasn't quite sure what to read from because I have a few books out. And so in the end, I've decided to read from We Three Heroes, which is book 4.5 in my series. But it's a novella collection, and this doesn't give anything away from anything. So I feel like it's kind of a safe one, a bit intriguing, and so it's based on one of the other main characters, not the main character of the Medoran Chronicles. Delucia was dreaming again. Tonight, it was a good dream. She was flying on the back of a mythical dracon, high up in the sky, the sun bathing her skin and reflecting off the crimson scales beneath her. Glancing down, she could see the whole of Trillin laid out, from the harbour all the way up to the palace and beyond. If she squinted past the glow of the shining city, she could almost see the balcony of her bedroom jutting out from the eastern tower, but she cast her eyes away. Right now, her life at the palace didn't exist. Here and now, she had no responsibilities, no duties, no obligations. Soaring high above the city, she wasn't a princess. She wasn't the heir to the human throne of Medora. She was nothing. She was no one. She was free. Then the clouds swept in, stealing the sunshine, and suddenly the dracon beneath her vanished. With the powerful beast no longer keeping her aloft, Delucia began to fall. An endless scream left her lips as she plummeted towards the city that was no longer shining, but shadowed by darkness. Fire. There was fire everywhere, smoke rising to the heavens. It burned her skin and clogged her throat, choking her screams, allowing the cries of others to reach her ears as she fell closer and closer to the ground. The city itself seemed to be screaming in pain, along with all of those trapped within it. Those were Delucia's people, and they were dying. A thunderclap sounded, the noise so loud it pierced Delucia's ears and drowned out the screams. Lightning streaked all around her, so bright it was blinding, taking with it the vision of the burning city. All that remained of her senses was the ringing in her ears, the scent of smoke, and the wind tearing at her body, body and the scorching heat of the embers that were now nearly within reach. Her sight cleared just in time to see the single image, one almost as shocking as the end of her beloved Trillin. It was a man standing at the steps of the palace, a crown of golden hair atop his head, eyes blazing like the fires surrounding him. Delucia had never seen such a face. He was so beautiful it hurt to look at him, and yet she could feel the emotion pouring from him, the disgust, the loathing. It was like oil coating her skin, suffocating and poisoning her from the outside in, because somehow she knew that this beautiful man considered her amongst what he most detested. Like the city dying around them, he wished for her to suffer the same fate. And as she fell close enough for his golden eyes to lock on hers, the last thing she saw was his satisfied expression as he witnessed her death. Dum, dum, dum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So your stories, Lynette, are set in the world of Medora, which is a kind of parallel version of Earth, very technologically advanced. In fact, so technologically advanced, it looks like magic, but it's actually like super science, right? Can you talk a little bit about, like...
For the first few books, that's a good way of putting it.
All right.
And then it kind of merges a little bit more into question mark magic.
Okay.
But the technology is still there.
Can you talk a little bit about bubble doors and TCDs so we can get a sense of the kind of technology in Medora?
Yeah, so in Medora, there's some really cool things, like a bubble door, which is a vial of liquid that you throw on the ground, and it creates this door that looks like a big shimmering bubble that you step into, and you kind of envision where you want to go, and it transports you straight to that place. Then like a TCD is TCD is a techno connectivity device, and it's kind of like it can do anything really, like you press a button and food appears. But then there's like a sentient library that opens doors to places and talks to people, and I just had a lot of fun when I was creating the world of Medora, and anytime I found myself in a plot hole, I would come up with something that got me out of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Jeremy, Blue Haven is quite different. It's not a parallel Earth at all. It's a completely sort of other universe that you've created, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of we're not quite sure exactly where Blue Haven is. In my story, it's about a girl, Jane Doe, who has to journey through this infinite labyrinth to find her father who's disappeared inside. And it starts off on an island called Blue Haven, and they worship the manor. It's this building that sits on top of their island. It's been there for thousands of years. So they've used it for thousands of years to journey through to these other worlds and return with stories to tell. So there are a bunch of adventurers, and different things have come to Blue Haven from these different worlds. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge of different things.
But in a way, Blue Haven is an island that feels almost like from an olden time, we might say. It doesn't have advanced technology or anything like that.
Yeah, I really wanted to tap into the kind of old school adventure kind of thing. So there's no definitely. I want a TCD to just bring me food whenever I want. By the way, So I kept it very sparse in terms of technology, just to get that sense of booby traps and dust and stone everywhere, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But obviously, once Jane gets inside the manor, there is an insane amount of sort of crazy stuff going down.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. Like Lynette, it's just one of those things. We're so lucky. Our job is to create stories and create worlds, and we just get to put all of our favourite things into our stories. So when I sat down to write this, I just thought, okay, I'm going to give it everything. So there are carnivorous forests, there are shifting rooms, there are booby traps and runaway trains. You just get to be a big nerd and just chuck it all into the story and just give your characters hell as they're going throughout the story.
I noticed it was interesting actually, because in the labyrinth and also in your library, it was like, you're both drawn to some of the same things. Like definitely you have to have booby traps, right? And like a river going through a room, yes. There's those sort of very archetypal, sort of wonderful things from adventure stories, which was so cool to see in there.
I think honestly, I can probably speak for us both. We just had fun with it. Like that's the beauty of writing fantasy into a story, is that you can just let your mind go wild. And yeah.
I could really tell that you were having fun, because I was having fun as a reader. Good. And it was like, oh, where are we going to go next? Where's this door going to lead? So obviously when you're moving between worlds and in a kind of magical realm like the library, portals are important. Jeremy, can you talk a little bit about the sort of doors and perhaps the key, the brass key?
Yeah, so the manor is basically, just picture this infinite labyrinth that's really dangerous. There are booby traps everywhere, and the idea is the booby traps are there to make sure that only the worthy pass between worlds. So if you want to go from one world to the next, you're going to have to kind of pass some tests to get there. And there are gateways that lead to each world that may open or they may not. It depends. It's amazing how similar our books are in some ways, this kind of sentient building. That has some kind of it's a character within the story itself. Jane goes in to rescue her father, but of course there's something is wrong with the manor. Something's not quite right. Jane recognises it immediately. Somebody else has found their way inside and is kind of corroding the manor. So all the gateways are falling apart. So this is where the forest is actually being drawn into the manor. There's snow in the manor. There's all these different. I was about to do a big spoiler for book 2. There's trains and all these kinds of things are actually coming through the gateways into the manor itself. Yeah.
And in the library, there is also, as you say, there were a really amazing amount of similarities. So that idea of the worthy. Can you talk about Alex and her worthiness?
Yeah, I'm just going to be so careful of spoilers. So Alex is the main character of the Medoran Chronicles. She's originally from this world. She's 16 years old, and in the opening chapter of Akane, which is the first book, she steps through a doorway and finds herself stranded in Medora, which is a fantasy world. It kind of utilises the trope of the chosen one. Alex is the only one who can kind of help save this world from a very, very bad person. But because of that, she's chosen by the library. This is me now slowing my speech to not give anything too big away. And she can therefore open doorways through the library as she gets to know the library. So there is that sense of... but she can also, as the series progresses, she can take people along with her, and she can sometimes not end up where she even wants to end up because the library intervenes and opens doorways that she doesn't want it to open. Or just changes her journey mid-journey, which she loves. Very much does not love that. But yeah, so it's kind of...
They also, in the library, the paintings are portals, which is super cool. Can you just talk about that a little?
Yes. It's pretty much what you said. There's paintings that show the history of Medora that sort of come and go on the walls. Because there's so much history, they can't just stay the one painting. They've got to change as, you're going to see this city or you're going to see this place, and it just revolves. And Alex can kind of press her way into them and find herself taking a nap, for example, in a nice,
that was
cozy
gorgeous,
chamber.
that part.
Yeah. So if she wants
was
to get
very,
away
very
from the
tired.
world, I think I may have been when I wrote that. I was like, everything's so loud. I need some silence.
Now, obviously, when you create a magical world, you get to create some magical creatures.
What's that face?
I was obsessed with Jurassic Park when I was a kid. Any creature, whenever I walk into a room, I'm basically thinking, can I climb the ceiling, and what am I kind of trying to get away from? So when I started to write this, I was like, it's so great to have some creatures in there, and there are creatures that we know, like there are spiders and things like that. But the chance to create your own kind of mythological or just dangerous creatures, I really relish.
Your creatures are super gross, Jeremy.
Oh, thank you. I take that as a real compliment. Just like me. No, it's a lot. So I have tin skins and leatherheads. So this big baddie who's entered the manor, his name is Roth. He's kind of an immortal guy from a different world. We're not actually exactly sure what he's trying to find in there, but it's something very powerful. And he has a whole army of tin skins and leatherheads. The leatherheads are these very, very tall, gangly creatures kind of just wrapped in these leather suits with gas masks on. And the tin skins are kind of these beast-like, wolf-like, boar-like creatures that are covered in tin. The idea is Roth is this... He's almost like a cancer on the manor, and he infects the air that he breathes. So the tin skins and leatherheads have to cover their skin so they don't get burned by his breath, basically. So Jane, whenever maybe they'll run into him, maybe not. But it kind of it affects.
Nice
clearly, they're going to fight the guy, but it feels like you're being infected by an illness around him, and you have to kind of you feel it in your eyes start to water, your skin starts to crawl,
and he's really super smelly.
Oh yeah, it's like ash and rancid meat and everything. He's basically rotting from the inside out. So.
Yeah, he was a really, really good baddie. Like,
thank
ooh.
Yeah.
Now your baddie's a little bit different. I'm not going to say who he is, but he's doesn't initially perhaps seem like a baddie. He's super hottie.
Is he?
Okay.
Look, I wanted to avoid the cliched bad guy when I started writing my bad guy. And at that time when I was writing it, it was always the ugly, nefarious kind of villain who was so obviously a villain that I wanted someone who was charming and lovely and who kind of came across as, this is someone I want to get to know.
Yeah, I wanted to get to know him.
Yeah. I have a lot of people who I have a lot of people who still very much ship him with the main character. And I'm like, it's the villain.
So obviously, as well as the baddies and the sort of creatures. Oh, we didn't talk about your creatures. We've got shadow walkers and flips and Jarnuks. Can you just talk about perhaps a couple of those?
I jump between, so I have different races, which are like, so the shadow walkers are a race of kind of humans that can walk through the shadows. They have this grey skin and they can sort of transport places through shadows. And there's flips who live in underwater cities. And you've got Jarnoks who live in they're tree dwellers. But then I've got actual creatures, which are like the Dracons, which are kind of like dragons. And there's like Hyroas, which are kind of like a bear-wolf mix. And there's some kind of wasp thing that I can't remember the name of that, like Fanda, that like paralyzes you if it stings you. I had a lot of fun with both the races and the creatures.
And did either of you sort of read a lot of mythology and that kind of stuff to sort of get ideas, or was it all just kind of stored at the back from being kids and fun? Did you sort of specifically research to kind of create those?
Yeah, a mix of both. I mean, to be a writer, you have to be a reader. So I've read books all my life, of course, and watched a lot of movies and cartoons. But so it's kind of drawn from both. It's kind of wish fulfillment in a way. And yes, I like being chased by creatures is kind of like a cool dream for me. But also reading lots of mythology books and all that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, like, it's...
I don't want to be chased by creatures.
Me neither.
Yeah, well, I kind of like it.
Not smelly ones, especially.
Yeah.
Or any ones.
But yeah, reading books on mythology and drawing from kind of just the classic adventures that have been told from prehistory or ancient history kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, similar answer. There was things that I just realised that in reading that excerpt, I totally gave away the dragons come into my series, which they aren't in the first few books. But that was something I wanted to bring across eventually because I just had that. That was my Jurassic Park. That was my longing. I love dragons. And I gave them a bit of a spin. I won't tell you whether they're good or whether they're bad, and you'll have to wait and find out. But things like that. Otherwise, it was just... Often it was a creature that I needed to fill a gap of the story. I'm like, something needs to be here. There's something missing. What can work here? And a lot of the time I just made it up completely, but drawing on, I guess, a lifetime of things that I've read or seen or not wanted, for that matter. Often it's things I don't want chasing me, so I would put them in my book.
So obviously, alongside the baddies, any good hero or heroine needs their sidekicks, their trusty sidekicks, or maybe they're slightly not trusty sidekicks, the ones we're not sure about. Can you talk a little bit about Jane's sidekicks?
Yeah, so sidekicks are such a great element of stories, right? There's so many iconic ones, like Donkey from Shrek and Chewbacca and C-3PO and R2. All the sidekicks kind of really bring a lot of levity to a story. So I have Hickory and Violet in mind. Violet is a little girl we meet at the start who's actually lived... Everybody on the island of Blue Haven hates Jane because as soon as she came to the island with her dad's kind of in this catatonic state, the manor shut its doors and hasn't let anyone inside. So Jane's lived on this island, kind of isolated from the manor and the other worlds, the whole island has, for 14 years. So Jane's kind of seen as the cursed one. Everybody hates her. They blame her for every bad thing that happens. Nobody wanted to let them into their house, so they were kind of raffled off to the Hollows, and they live in her basement. Jane's just caring for her dad down there. And Violet is the little girl who lives in that house. So they've actually struck up a bit of a friendship. She's a little firecracker. She's a kind of a fan favourite. Hickory is a character who Jane meets once she goes into the manor. We're never quite sure where he sits. He's a bit of a trickster, whether he's good or bad. He kind of jumps between the two. But it's so much fun to write the sidekicks. You have great sidekicks as well. They're fun, aren't they?
Thank you. So much fun. Yes.
Yeah, do you want to tell us about Bear and Jordan?
Yeah, so the two people that Alex kind of first meets, or early on in when she lands in Medora, these two guys, one's called Jordan, one's called Bear, and they're just good quality guys. But it was really important to me to have really strong male-female friendships that were never going to cross the boundary into anything more than that. And because I'm pretty kind of anti-love triangle and anti-insta love and all of that, and so I always wanted these really two good quality guys, and they're lovely and they're fun and they're loyal and they're supportive and they're just so much fun to write. And then when another best friend comes into it later on, she's a she, and so there's a nice balance between, there's two girls, the main character, and the other girl, and then the two guys, and I just love writing them because it's such, having friendships and good friendships in a book, they're sidekicks, but they're more than that. They become family, and as you can tell from We Three Heroes, mine become the heroes, mine are the heroes of their own stories, and the main character could not do what she does without them, and the same is true for Jane,
I think it's very true. Do we have any writers in the audience? Put up your hands if you like writing. Got a few there. Excellent.
Awesome. That's great to see.
Very good. Yeah, because it's really cool. Like when you're writing a hero, you can't make them too perfect, right? Otherwise, the story is just boring. They're just going to do everything themselves. So they need to kind of have some moments where they'll fall short, and it's the sidekicks that can really help them. Everybody's got their strengths. The whole idea that everybody, when they come together, can actually save the day.
Like, let's be real. Harry would have died without Hermione.
Over and over.
Yeah.
Even without Ron at points too, but
Ron
without...
It should just be called Hermione Granger and the Philosopher's Stone and everything. Let's
that
be
is
honest.
so mean. That is so
that
mean.
was a bit mean.
I love Hermione, sorry.
I do too.
I love Hermione, I must say.
Team Hermione.
So with the central characters, I love that we've got female heroines. Awesome to see that, and they're sort of powerful in their own ways. The library actually at one point talks to Alex, and it says to her, if you always relive the same experiences, you'll never learn new skills or have opportunities to develop your character. And I think that's really, good advice for a writer. Like, you've got to put your characters in new situations in order to test them and find out what they can do. So I'd love to know, when you started writing Jane and Alex, did you have a sense of what they were capable of? Or, for example, Alex has a gift when she arrives at Akane. She doesn't know what that gift is, but everyone at that school does have a gift of some kind. Did you know what her gift was when you started writing?
That was probably the only thing I knew when I started writing. The writing of that first book was a bit interesting. I just literally could not find a book I wanted to read, so I started to write one, which in hindsight is so audacious. But I started writing it, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where it was going, and I got about 80,000 words in, which is a book.
That's quite a lot.
That's an entire book. The end book is 120,000, and my computer crashed and I lost 60,000 words.
Oh.
Which is like the size of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, essentially.
I felt that.
Yeah, I know. Everyone goes,
right here.
oof. And I just remember thinking, oh, you know what? Cool, I'm done. I wasn't meant to write that book, but her story stayed with me, and I couldn't not find out how it ended. So I went back and I rewrote it all, So the only thing that I knew the whole way along was what her gift was. Everything else was a surprise. And when I rewrote it, I kept honestly, it was the first book I'd written. And so those 60,000 words were not needed. So it was a blessing in disguise that I lost it all. The whole first chapter was her going out and buying milk. I'm not even kidding. And not sure what type of milk to buy.
The drama.
Yeah, it was just amazing writing. So that was the only guiding light that I had, was knowing that her gift would come out at the end, and this was how.
Wow, that's really interesting. And what about with you, Jeremy? How well did you know Jane before you started?
It's been interesting. So do we have any 12-year-olds in the audience? Yeah, so...
Oh, a lot.
It took me 12... This is 12 years ago I came up with the idea. So for your entire lives, I've been writing this one book, which is insane and kind of depressing, but it worked, so thank you. But yeah, when I started to write this, I wanted Jane's parents to be a part of the story because if you read a lot of the stories, you think about Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, the parents are always vacant through it. I wanted to have the parents be a part of the story in some way. But of course, the reason why in those stories the parents are always vacant is it immediately makes you feel for the hero. You still have to have the parents away in some way, so the hero has to kind of stand up for themselves. So I thought while I was travelling, I was in the Cairo Museum, which is in Egypt, back in 2007, and this idea popped into my head. And I thought, okay, I want the parents to be part of the story, but not there. So I had the idea of maybe Jane is a carer, that her dad would be sick for some reason, and that she would have to look after him. And it's really crazy because I remember as I was walking around, I started thinking I'll have to do some research about what being a carer is like. And I think my subconscious was really preparing me because my dad was sick with a very rare form of cancer at the time. He'd been sick for a few years. He was up and travelling with my mum at the time, but we had no idea what was going to happen. His health really declined rapidly, and I had to then head back home from my trip. And I was then a carer for him while I sat down to start. So I was kind of like, I could not believe that. That's why I think maybe my subconscious was telling me, dude, this is about to happen to you, so get ready. So when I sat down to write the first chapter, Jane was being carer for her dad, I was being carer for mine for the first 7 months of his life. So it's really special that I knew that he wouldn't live to see the end of this. He died a year later, but I made sure that he was the first person to read anything from this, so the first chapter. So that I like. I mean, he hated it. I was like, oh, Dad, what do you think? He's like, oh, the chapter title didn't make sense and I was lost after the first line. So I was like, oh, thank you, Dad, that's amazing. But no, so that was really great. But yeah, Jane was actually also started, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but Jane also started out as a boy for the first 5 years of writing this or more. It was actually called Finn Pigeon and the Cradle of All Worlds.
Oh, wow.
But I sent it out to one publisher and then a second publisher said the same, that because it was a boy-focused adventure, it should be very much younger middle grade. So they wanted me to make it kind of this big, like really much shorter, trim out all the scary bits, because that's what was selling well at the time. And I did try. I sat down and tried to cut it down, but it was becoming a story I didn't want it to be. So I thought, does that mean if I turn it into a girls' not girls and boys story, but if I make it a girl focus, I don't like that publishing marketing phrase because a story is a good story, right? But I sat down and just changed the pronoun from he to she, and the character and the story just came alive in the way that I really wasn't expecting, and Jane just leapt from the page immediately. So yeah, that's
fascinating.
Yeah, it's been.
So a couple of good tips there. One is back up your work, and
oh
the second one
I'm
is.
so sorry. That's so terrible.
I just finished uni. I knew better. I have no idea what happened to all my USBs, which you guys won't know what those are. But
Well, I actually. My computer got stolen and I realised I didn't have a copy of my manuscript, and then I had to email everyone I knew that I'd sent it to and ask if they had it. So I've been there.
yeah.
So, it was really touching to hear what you said about your dad, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing that. But it brings me to the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is just how these stories, they're set in other worlds, but there are things in those worlds that affect the heroes just like we're affected in our world. So, the fact that Jane is a carer for her sick father is one of them. And then in Alex's world, Jordan has, a difficult family, and he has a brother who has, is it too much of a spoiler to say that? He has
maybe.
a troubled brother. And I loved how, it doesn't matter how magical the world is, you still face the problems that teenagers face. And yeah, I thought that was a beautiful element of both of the stories.
Well, it's so important. I mean, we're writing essentially coming-of-age stories, and we're writing about real people, even if they're fictional. And, they have to be real, they have to be relatable. As Jeremy said before, they have to be flawed, because that's what we connect to, but it's also what you connect to as readers. And you fall in love with these characters because you go through these things yourselves. I mean, you might not find a doorway to Medora or find yourself stuck in a labyrinth, and I hope you don't, but that'd be kind of cool. But, you read books because you want to experience what the characters are experiencing, and when they go through these things, you go through them with you, and it's really powerful. And the books that stay with me forever are the ones I've read that have that kind of impact on me. So
yeah, no, I absolutely. I think it's one of the things to keep in mind when writing fantasy and creating magical worlds is to keep it human. You can kind of get lost in all the different aspects of the world you've created, and some writers will write way too much on that. I think at every point you've got to bring it back to the human characteristic, bring it back to the main character, because ultimately that's the person you're going to root for. So you can have the creatures and the booby traps and the magic doors and all that kind of stuff, but if you don't have a real character or real characters to root for, all of that is kind of meaningless. It's soulless.
yeah.
All right, so I've run out of time for my questions, even though I actually have more things I would like to ask, but it's now going to be over to you guys for you to ask any questions that you want of Jeremy and Lynette. You can ask about their books, you can ask about their writing process.
If you do ask about either of our books, just be mindful of spoilers for other people in the audience, because we'll have a freak out face if we hear stuff.
There's like an ejector seat, and they'll like press the button and you'll be like fired out of the room. So if you have a question, I would love to see you raise your hand, and a microphone is going to come around.
Oh, we've got one at the
very
back.
back.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for getting it started. It's always a little nerve-wracking to be the first, so that's great.
Oh, there's one there too. Okay.
I don't think the mic is on.
I heard, do you know from the get-go?
I heard nothing.
I have super hearing.
Did we know when we were young if we wanted to be a writer?
No, you go first.
No, I did not. I never intended to be a writer. I am jealous of Jeremy's 12 years.
Oh, God, don't be.
Well, I mean, I write really fast, so I'm the complete opposite end of the spectrum to you. I wrote like the final book in my series in like 26 days, so it's insane.
Don't tell me that.
You've just written your sequel within a much more condensed period of time. I honestly never wanted to be a writer, and after I wrote my first book, Akane, I still didn't want to be a writer. I'd lost all those words, I'd gotten them back, I'd finished the book, I was happy, and it was for me. But the story stayed with me, and so I went on and I wrote the sequel, and then it was after I finished writing the second book in that series that I kind of had a freak out and realised I wanted people to read it, and so that was the point when I tried to get published, but I still don't actually understand why I'm sitting here. But I love it. I just have no idea how it happened.
I think that captures something really special though, which is that when you start writing, you should just do it because you love it, not necessarily because you need anyone else to read it. It's just like a wonderful thing to do for yourself. Yeah,
and because it's such a long, laborious process, like it's really hard to write a book. You have to love the story. I've always been into storytelling. For a long time, I wanted to be an actor, but that wasn't. I realised very quickly that wasn't for me, and realised that I wanted to be the one telling the story. And so I'd kind of always been obsessed with storytelling, but it wasn't until I finished high school. I studied creative writing at university, but then I majored in screenwriting. But when this idea came into my head, I knew it had to be a book.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Have we got another question? Okay, we've got one down the front here. You can just shout it out if that's okay.
How do you edit such a large book? How do you manage to edit it and tie it back together so it makes sense?
Okay, so the question is, how do you edit, especially with a large book, and tie it all back together so it makes sense? Thank you.
I think that's a great question. Thank you. I think the thing to remember, every author is different. Every author has their different creative process, their own editing process. For me, I'm a plotter, so before I even sit down to start writing, the story's all kind of in my head. I can't help it. It's like dominoes falling, so I know what the ending is, and that's where in my head I can make lots of notes and kind of tie in all the different threads together. The editing process itself, it's a lot of hard work. You kind of, once you get signed up to a publishing house, you kind of do what's called a structural edit, which is kind of where you're taking a step back and looking at the grand kind of arc of the story to see if everything's kind of happening in the right order, to see which sections might need to be moved around. And then the closer you get to publication, the more you bring it down to the minute kind of detail. So you do kind of a line edit where you're looking at the actual paragraph by paragraph punctuation point, but it's maddening. But it's a lot of fun as well. So everybody's different.
Fun.
Yeah. But yeah, it can be. Is that similar to? Do you agree with?
Yeah, I am. So I'm a plotter for my Whisper series, which we haven't talked about because it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but I mean, it's not like, it's still fantasy, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Talk to me later about that if you want to hear about that. But with the Madoran Chronicles, the 6-book epic fantasy series, I was very much a pantser. I tried to plot it at one stage and Alex kind of went, ha ha ha, no, we're doing this. So I had to kind of trust my gut and my instinct with that. But because of that, I wrote it very sequentially and very fast again, so it kind of was really quite clean when I was done. I like that Jeremy covered the publishing, editing side of things, because I'm going to bring it back to when I didn't have a publisher, which, unless you're amazingly young and have one already, I would say, which is really cool and not unheard of. What I did, especially with my first couple of books, was I had some friends or family or people who I know who read a lot of books. I would give it to them and I would ask for their feedback, and one person would tell me that, I don't like this, or hey, I love this, or maybe you need to work on this, and I would gather all that feedback and I would try and just get in there and change little bits of it until the much more professional editing came along, when someone goes, this is what you do, and you go, wow, how did you see that? So critique readers or better readers, they're really useful and really helpful at that stage.
Yeah, great. Just be careful who you pick, though, because some people might be secretly jealous of you and say mean things.
Oh, your friends, but you need those people. You want the ones that you trust, and the ones, there's no point giving it to someone who doesn't read either, because they have no comparison for any other,
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Perhaps, over here in the middle. Thank you. Yeah, that one. Thank you. What's your childhood favourite book?
It's so cruel asking for
just
one.
one.
I'm gonna go teenagerhood, childhood. Look, the most impacting series, and I can't even pick one. It'd have to be Harry Potter. I grew up with those books as a teenager, then into my early adulthood, and they just, they shaped me as a reader, as a writer, and there's nothing you can't go past Harry and Hermione and Book Ginny, not really Ginny, but Book Ginny rocks, and I have a lot of love for that.
So I'm a little bit older, so I didn't read Harry Potter until I was at university. So when I was a kid, I loved Roald Dahl growing up. The Twits was one of my favourite books. I read a lot of R.L. Stine, like
unsurprising, Jeremy.
The Beach House and all those kind of Goosebumps kind of things. I loved being scared as a kid, except when I tried to watch It, not the new movie that came out, but the terrible teleseries. I was horrified and didn't sleep for nights. Just that the clothesline at the. Sorry, I'm freaking out right now already. But yeah, to a point. Unless there were clowns involved, I like being scared.
You were a big Narnia fan too, weren't you?
Yeah, always Narnia. And like Jurassic Park, when I first saw that, my mind was blown. I was 12 at the time, and I'm still obsessed with dinosaurs now, and so I've got kind of dinosaur-ish like creatures in mind, and there will always be more.
That's it for now. So can you please join me in thanking Jeremy Lachlan and Lynette Noni?
Thank you so much. You've been
Thanks,
wonderful.
Guys.